Who is there?
Who I am is not the question.
I am Atris, Jedi Master, the last historian of the Jedi, the last of the Jedi.
Those are titles, words you cling to as the darkness falls around you.
In a recent video, we presented a brief look at the story of Atris, a Jedi Master who became so bitter and set in her ways that she fell to the dark side. In her quest to defeat the Sith, she became a Sith herself, though she long denied it. The tale of her gradual fall to darkness has much more to it than we talked about in that video, however. In fact, the story of Atris is worth a video of its own. This video, to be specific.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Atris was a Jedi Master during the old Sith Wars, 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. She was extremely orthodox and fiercely devoted to the tenets of the Jedi Code, considered a bit of an extremist by other Jedi Masters. A Jedi historian, she was the chief librarian of the Jedi Archives, one of the first custodians of the archives of Coruscant's Jedi Temple. She rose to prominence in the years after the Great Sith War, in which many of the Order's greatest masters were killed and the Jedi homeworld, Ossus, was destroyed. After the war's end, Atris became one of the Order's most outspoken members. She was highly critical of how the Jedi had operated prior to the Great Sith War, believing that many of its more laissez-faire policies were to blame for the corruption of Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma, the Sith Lords that had caused the war. Drawing on the suggestions of several millennia-old Jedi Masters, she proposed a number of reforms, which included only recruiting younger Force sensitives for training, restricting Masters to training just one Padawan at a time, promoting a much more rigid interpretation of the Jedi Code, and forbidding Jedi from having romantic relationships. As the Jedi Order rebuilt, most of these reforms took effect, and Atris received a seat on the Jedi Council. During her time on the Council, Atris became close with a younger Jedi named Meetra Surik. Though Surik was less experienced and of a lower rank than Atris looked up to her, seeing her almost as a hero. She cared deeply for Surik and believed Surik was an ideal example of what a Jedi should be, someone who would always do what was right and needed to be done. In Surik, Atris saw a Jedi who had a natural attunement to the feelings of others and who was a natural leader, both traits that Atris didn't have. She became good friends with Surik, developing a close emotional bond with her. Atris was still a member of the Jedi Council 3,963 years before the Battle of Yavin, when the Republic requested help from the Jedi in the Mandalorian Wars. At length, the Council decided to not intervene, fearing that Jedi sent to fight the Mandalorians would fall to the dark side and become Sith. Atris was a strong supporter of this decision, but many Jedi were not, most notably Revan and Malak, who broke from the Jedi Order to join the fight anyway. A number of Jedi joined them, including Meetra Surik, who became one of Revan's top generals. Atris felt personally betrayed by Surik's decision to fight in the Mandalorian Wars. In spite of herself, she began to resent the Jedi that she had once called a friend. After the war's end, Surik returned to Coruscant to face the Jedi Council's judgment, having lost her connection to the Force in the Battle of Malachor V. When Surik stood before them, Atris and the other Masters were horrified by the wound in the Force they felt within her, and feared what it could mean for the galaxy. Atris took this as a sign that she had been right all along. But Atris's convictions wavered when Surik was asked to defend her actions. Instead of showing repentance, she was utterly defiant, absolutely certain that her actions had been right. So great was her conviction that Atris began to doubt herself, to wonder if the Revanchists, not the Council, had been the ones in the right. This bout of self-doubt enraged Atris, and her resentment for Surik blossomed into hatred. She pushed for the Council to execute Surik, but cooler heads prevailed, and she was instead sentenced to exile. A year later, the Jedi Civil War broke out, with Revan and Malak threatening the galaxy as the new Dark Lords of the Sith. Atris continued to sit on the Jedi Council during this war, but she gradually began to spend more and more time away from Coruscant. Fearing that what had happened on Ossus could happen to Coruscant, she moved a large collection of Jedi artifacts, plus a few captured Sith ones, to a secret polar complex on Telos 4. She hoped that Telos' remote location would mean that the artifacts would be safe. Instead, the presence of her collection marked Telos for death. In one of the earliest battles of the war, a Sith fleet subjected Telos to orbital bombardment, rendering most of the planet uninhabitable. Atris's polar hideout was spared, however, as was Atris herself. After the destruction of Telos, Atris became increasingly reclusive, spending more and more of her time at her secret hideout. There, despite her best efforts, she couldn't help thinking back to Meetra Surik. Ever since the trial, Atris continued to experience internal conflict, wondering how things might have been different if she, too, had gone to fight in the Mandalorian Wars. She began carrying Surik's lightsaber, which she had taken after her exile, wearing it alongside, or even instead, of her own. The Jedi Civil War ultimately ended with the Republic victorious and the Sith Empire vanquished, but a new threat to the Jedi Order soon arose. The Order's numbers had declined significantly during the Civil War, and those Jedi that remained began to disappear. Some shadowy force was hunting the last of the Jedi, something the Jedi could neither detect nor understand. They correctly determined that it was something related to the Sith, but this brought them no closer to stopping it. By 3952 BBY, less than 100 Jedi were left in the galaxy. Hoping to discover the nature of the Sith threat together, Atris assembled them for a conclave on the planet Qatar, planning to discuss the threat and how to stop it. But Atris didn't go to join the conclave. Instead, she let word of it leak out, hoping to draw the Sith out so they could be fought. This was a grave mistake. Her leak drew the attention of Darth Nihilus, who came to Qatar during the conclave and destroyed all life on the planet, feeding on the Force energies of the Jedi present. Following this disaster, the Jedi Order effectively disbanded. Only 5 Jedi Masters, Atris included, were left after Qatar, plus a scattering of knights, all of whom were in hiding. The other 4 Jedi Masters believed that Atris had died at Qatar with the others, and all went into self-imposed exile on war-torn worlds, hoping to draw out Meetra Surik, who they believed was connected to this new Sith threat. Atris learned of and documented their survival, but she didn't reach out to any of the survivors, and instead holed herself up in the complex on Telos. There, she laid plans to rebuild the Jedi Order from the ground up. Over time, she started to consider herself to be the last of the Jedi, despite knowing that others survived. Atris fashioned her polar complex into a new Jedi Academy, but despite this, she never recruited any students. Instead, she brought in a group of Ichani handmaidens, all half-sisters, none of whom were Force-sensitive, or so Atris thought. Atris forced them all to take vows that they would never study the ways of the Force, supposedly to allow them to more easily detect it when the Jedi had fallen to the dark side. In reality, these vows had a darker purpose. They were to prevent the handmaidens from sensing what Atris had become. In the years after the Jedi Civil War, Atris had taken to studying the many Sith holocrons she had gathered as part of her artifact stash. She hoped that by understanding the Sith, she would learn how to stop them. Instead, the artifacts corrupted her. As Atris spent many long hours locked in a chamber with the holocrons, meditating with them, they whispered to her, inflaming her hatred for Meetra Surik. Like the other surviving Jedi Masters, Atris came to realize that the new Sith threat was somehow linked to what she had felt in Surik all the way back at her trial, the wound in the Force left by Malachor V. Atris, like the other Masters, realized that the exile would be needed to draw out and defeat the Sith. This made her all the more bitter, as, once again, Surik would be the hero while she couldn't be. In 3951 BBY, Atris arranged for Surik to return to the known galaxy and lured her to the Academy on Telos. There, the two were reunited for the first time in a decade, but their reunion did nothing to ease Atris's bitterness. Instead, Atris saw that, through her exile, Meetra Surik had remained who she always was, a natural leader and a hero. Even though she'd lost her connection to the Force, Surik was still a Jedi. Atris allowed Surik and her companions to leave the Telos Academy, but drowned in her own bitterness after this meeting. She became the very thing she had sworn to destroy.
It is such a quiet thing to fall, but far more terrible is to admit it.
In truth, Atris had begun to fall to the dark side long before Surik's return, or even before her exile. It began when Surik left for the Mandalorian Wars, when Atris was consumed with bitterness over this perceived betrayal. But after her confrontation with the exile 10 years later, Atris finally broke. She realized that Surik had been right all along and responded to this epiphany with anger. She swore that the new Jedi Order, her Jedi Order, wouldn't stray from battle and wouldn't hesitate to do what needed to be done. It would be a more disciplined order, a more battle-ready order, and an order that would take control of the crumbling galaxy and set everything right. But Atris's ideal Jedi Order wasn't a Jedi Order at all. If she had her way, she would turn the Jedi into the Sith. Not long after Atris's fall, one of Surik's companions, Kreia, killed the remaining masters of the Jedi Council and came before Atris on Telos. Unbeknownst to Surik until that point, Kreia had once been Darth Traya, the Lord of Betrayal, the former leader of the Sith who now threatened the galaxy. At last, Atris came face to face with the source of the new Sith threat. But she didn't kill Kreia or even restrain her. Instead, Kreia forced Atris to confront who she really was, a new Darth Traya.
Different. Know that there was once a Darth Traya, and that she cast aside that role, was exiled, and found a new purpose. But there must always be a Darth Traya, one that holds the knowledge of betrayal, who has been betrayed in their heart, and will betray in turn. You have...
Surik arrived in pursuit of Kreia not long after, only to find that Atris had embraced the dark side. The two fought, with Atris using the exile's own lightsaber against her, and in the end, Atris was defeated. But Surik didn't kill the disgraced Jedi Master. Instead, she showed Atris the error of her ways. Atris ultimately repented and renounced both the mantle of Darth Traya and her title as a Jedi Master, choosing to go into exile. Atris was later judged by a new Jedi Council as she had once judged Mitra Surik. So that's the full story of Atris, a Jedi Master that was in denial of being a Sith. But what do you think? Are there other stories from Knights of the Old Republic that you'd like us to tell? Let us know all that and more in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.